a teenage film snob, baby. I was a teenage film snob, baby.
It's the dawn of a new millennium. Well, it's 1998. Jake Blues is dead. Cab Calloway had an illegitimate child. Elwood is alone, and this time he's been hunted by the police, the Confederate Army, Russian mobsters, and he's putting the band back together. Again. Strip clubs, vodka, zombies, children, car chases, bluegrass, and every choice you would hope for a legacy sequel is ignored. But the soundtrack's still pretty great. Welcome to As a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, and this is why you should watch Blues Brothers 2000. Alright gang, we're back to another episode of Why You Should Watch. I'm talking about some of the films that I loved as a child or films I've discovered as an adult that are critically panned, often criticized by viewers as well, the general audience, and I'm telling you why you should watch them. Now, this one was a particularly tricky one for two reasons. I grew up on the Blues Brothers. One of the first films I remember ever seeing, my dad showed it to me when I was very young. He taped it off the TV onto a VHS with all the naughty words blanked out, and it became my Bible. It was my everything. It was my favorite movie in the world for the longest time. So the sequel to my favorite movie of all time for the longest time was always going to be tricky. Now, I did watch Blues Brothers 2000 a lot as a kid, and I was the right age for it. It came out in 1998. I was 10 years old, probably 9, when I watched it for the first time, and I thought it was the best thing ever. I didn't think it was quite as good as the first one, but I really enjoyed it. I loved that there was a kid in the group. I thought that was really cool. We talk about, representation in screen, and again, to see a child up there with my hero, Elwood Blues, was pretty cool. I liked the car chases, I liked that there were zombies, and I really liked the soundtrack as well. So it had a lot going for it. Now, over the years, my appreciation for that first film has gotten stronger and stronger. The more I watch it, the older I get, the more I love it. This one, as I become more involved in film and enjoying, as a film watcher and stuff like that, I can see the cracks. So I will go in saying, this is not my favorite film that I've done so far in this series, but I will also say that when I first rolled out I did say I was never going to try and tell you it's a good movie. I was never going to try and defend the film. I would just look at the film subjectively and say, despite its flaws, this is why you should watch it. Because I will say, this was a tougher one. This was definitely a tough one. This was tougher than Repo. This was tougher than Jersey Girl. This was tougher than Josie and the Pussycats. And a lot of it falls down to the fact that Dan Aykroyd is not the lead of the first movie. The heavy lifting is done by John Belushi. He's mostly the strong, silent type. And putting him in the spotlight changes the dynamic of that character and does make it a little bit trickier. The other thing that the film struggles with is its PG rating. And that was a studio choice, but taking it away from its edgier origins does make it a bit of a tougher watch as well, because you don't get to see all of the bad behavior. Like, the Blues Brothers are not good guys. They do bad things, and they had to kind of tame it. But that being said, there's a lot to love about it. But before we get into why we should watch it, we're going to go through all the facts about the film. I'll tell you the history of the film. I'll tell you why people didn't like it. And then, of course, I'll tell you why you should watch it. So first of all, the film is directed by John Landis, who directed the original Blues Brothers. He also directed Kentucky Fried Movie, Animal House, An American Werewolf in London, Trading Places, Twilight Zone the Movie, Spies Like Us, Three Amigos, Coming to America, and Beverly Hills Cop 3. Quite the resume. He also wrote it, John Landis. In addition to directing those, he wrote Blues Brothers, he wrote American Werewolf in London, he wrote Twilight Zone the Movie, he wrote Clue, and he also wrote An American Werewolf in Paris, which is a film we're going to do next. It's on the list. The film's other writer was none other than Dan Aykroyd, who made his start in Second City before going to SNL. He also co-wrote The Blues Brothers. He co-wrote Ghostbusters, Spies Like Us, and Ghostbusters 2, Nothing But Trouble, and Coneheads. An absolute paramount titan of comedy, Dan Aykroyd, in his earlier years, for sure. The film was released by Universal on a budget of $28 million, which blew my mind. It was $28 million. And to be fair, you can definitely justify it. There's so much talent in this film. All the musicians alone, you can justify the talent. And there is a little bit of CGI. There's not too much CGI, and when there is, it's pretty good considering it's 1998. But it is mostly practical effects. Its return, however, at the box office was $14 million, so it only made half its money back. There's an incredibly large cast of cameos from musicians everywhere, but your main cast are Dan Aykroyd, reprising his role as Elwood Blues, John Goodman as Mighty Mac, J. Evan Bonifant as Buster Blues, and Joe Morton as the new Cab, basically. So Curtis, played by Cab Calloway in the first movie, his illegitimate son is Joe Morton, who'd go on to be Cyborg's dad in Justice League. On IMDb, it has a score of 4.9 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes 47% and 37% audience score. So 47% critics, 37% audience. So they both agreed it wasn't very good. Audience actually tougher on the film than Rotten Tomatoes. Before we defend the film, let's get into a brief history. So let me tell you, it's 1973, and Dan Aykroyd introduces John Belushi to electrified urban blues for the first time. The two quickly develop a double act and use it to help warm up the crowd when they join the cast of Saturday Night Live in 1975. You might remember, you might not know this, they were the original cast of SNL, those two. The SNL musical director jokingly calls them the Blues Brothers, and 1 year later they perform Slim Harper's I'm a King Bee for the first time in bee costumes on SNL. 2 years later, the pair make their official debut as Joliet, Jake, and Elwood J. Blues, the Blues Brothers, and open the show with Hey Bartender. And if you've never heard their version of that song, it's incredible. What a great track. This leads to live gigs before a commercially successful tour under the banner A Briefcase Full of Blues. I have that album on CD somewhere in my garage here, and it's a great live album. It's so good. And I discovered it way late. I didn't discover it until I was in my 20s. I was at a CD store, and I happened to stumble upon it. I was like, how did I not know about this? And I used to listen to it driving to and from uni all the time. And I really bug my wife with it because she was not a fan of it at all, particularly Rubber Biscuit, but I really enjoyed all of that. Fast forward to 1980 and the cult favourite movie The Blues Brothers is released. It performs well at the box office but is met with mixed reactions by the critics. It later earns cult status as fans find it on home video and at anniversary screenings. A sequel was in the works following the commercial success of the film until tragedy struck. In 1982, John Belushi dies of a drug overdose and all plans for a sequel are scrapped. There's a really wonderful documentary all about John Belushi and his tragic passing, and it's heartbreaking and it's scary, but it's also beautiful and a real ode to him. If you're not familiar with the work of John Belushi, there's a great SNL compilation, The Best of John Belushi, and that was a huge part of my childhood, and it's so funny, and definitely worth your time if you haven't watched it. Or you can just go on YouTube and look up, John Belushi compilation, but he was just so incredibly funny. Over time, the Blues Brothers band continues to perform with John Belushi's brother Jim and John Goodman filling in. As more time passes, Aykroyd and Landis decide to take another crack at a sequel. They take it to Universal Studios and it's greenlit on one condition. The film must be PG to have a better strike rate at the box office. The pair reluctantly agree and start developing a script called The Blues Brothers Meet the Voodoo Queen. Jim Belushi is considered for a role as the long-lost brother Z Blues, but when a cable deal prevents him from signing on, an illegitimate child of Cab Calloway's character Curtis is created. Elwood is entrusted with an orphan child, and the stage is set for the return of the greatest blues band in the history of mankind. So as you can see, the film had its hands tied behind its back before they even started. And some would argue, why make a movie if you're not going to be able to make the movie you want? But that's Hollywood. That's the movie business. It's hard enough to get a movie made at all. So when you get to the stage where you're actually going to get one made, a lot of filmmakers and creators will take all the caveats that are thrown at them to get their story told. And I think a lot of this film works. The casting of John Goodman is not the problem with the movie. In fact, in terms of replacing John Belushi, if you have to, he's a pretty good pick, to be honest. He's got a good voice. He's a larger guy like Belushi was, at least next to Dan Aykroyd. He's a very different character. John Belushi, very negative, very advantageous, whereas Mighty Mac is quite a jolly, jovial, light-hearted guy who's just happy to be part of the band. But even still, I don't think he is the reason this film didn't do so well. It's doing a lot of things. So for those of you who haven't seen the film opens with Elwood being released from prison, presumably following his incarceration at the end of the first film. So if you've never seen the first film, first of all, go and watch The Blues Brothers because it's brilliant. It's just one of the most amazing films of all time. Wonderful soundtrack, really funny, great action, just an excellent, excellent film. So Elwood's released from prison, but no one's told him that his brother has passed away. Instead of recasting Jake Blues, they killed him off, which I think is the right thing to do. Sometimes you can get away with it. Like when they decide to kill off T'Challa in the Black Panther franchise, I think that was the wrong decision. And not to take anything away from Chadwick Boseman's incredible performance. But I think, it was important to have that character still in the universe for representation, for the longevity of that character. Jake Blues was created and developed by John Belushi. Like, it was his character. Like, that was his persona. Like, a lot of people wouldn't even know John Belushi's name, but they'd know Jake Blues. So I understand that. So I think it was the right choice. So Elwood's there waiting. He finally gets picked up by a stripper who takes him back to a strip club, which is owned by Willie, the drummer from the Blues Brothers band in the first film. After that, he goes to visit the nun that used to oversee his orphanage when he was a child. She was the reason they went on tour in the first film. The orphanage was getting shut down, so they decided to raise money to save the orphanage, which they did. In the sequel, she lets him know that now that he's alone, he might benefit from being a mentor, and hands him a child, Buster, for him to mentor, which is a terrible idea because Elwood is not a good role model at all. And she also advises that Cab Calloway, Curtis, had a son. So Elwood looks him up, tries to borrow some money, tries to, relate to him as a brother, and it doesn't go well. And then basically Elwood ends up kidnapping Buster, not intentionally, he just kind of keeps him around, gets stuck into a situation with the Russian mob, ends up on the run, and then tries to put the band back together. There's a lot going on. They also book a gig at a place called Queen Musette's Plantation House, I think it is, which is like a blues club in Louisiana where there's a battle of the bands, and it's run by a voodoo witch. So the original title was all about meeting her. So she was always part of it. They seem to lean away from that part for most of the film until the very last bit. Like the voodoo queen only shows up at the very, very end of the film. Played by Erykah Badu, and she's fantastic and sounds great and looks great, and just she's incredible. So that's the plot. And then, of course, they play gigs and they get into trouble with the law and stuff like that, just like in the first one. It's a very much a copy and paste film in a lot of ways. A lot of the things they did in the first film, they repeat in the second film, including returning characters like Aretha Franklin and Bob, who was the head of Bob's Country Bunker in the first one. Here's Bob's Country Kitchen in the second one. A lot of repeat jokes, executed maybe not quite so well, but there's definitely a few moments, like when they're in Bob's Country Kitchen and they're trying to escape the police. I like that Elwood covers his head in shaving cream and pretends to be a contagious puffball monster. I thought that was pretty funny. So there's definitely moments. But you can just tell they're constantly trying to push the film as far as they can before being cut off at a PG, and for that, it always softens the edge a little bit. The film also feels a lot more like a jukebox musical. The first one, the music was very much a part of the plot for the most part. Like, there are a couple that definitely staged, but it definitely feels like intricate to the story, whereas this, it almost feels like, all right, let's cut to a music video. I'm not critiquing the film. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm here to talk about why you should watch it, but I'm also very aware of what doesn't work in the film for me. So I think that's important. If I'm going to tell you why I should watch it, I should let you know what doesn't work as well. Okay, the complaints. Here's why people don't like the movie. The first one, it lacks the gritty, rebellious charm of the original, and I do agree with that. I do. It's not gritty. It's not rebellious. So there are moments of rebellion, but it definitely feels a lot safer than the first film. The first film, they're cursing all over the place. There's some pretty intense practical effects with car crashes and Carrie Fisher's hunting them down with machine guns and rockets and stuff like that. There's none of that in here. So I agree with that. I can't fault them for that complaint. That's fair. The second complaint is that there's missing chemistry between Dan Aykroyd and John Goodman, and that I don't agree with. I actually think they've got pretty good chemistry. You have to remember that Dan Aykroyd's character, Elwood, is not a charismatic guy. He's a loner. When his brother's in jail, he lives alone in an apartment. And it's the worst-looking kind of one-bedroom apartment you've ever seen. It's this tiny little hovel. Like, he's not a social guy. He's not a clean person. There's a line in the first one about how he's smelly. He smells bad. Like, he shouldn't have chemistry with anyone, really, except his brother. But I think all things considered, he and John Goodman actually do play off each other quite well. And John Goodman is a welcome presence in there. The kid factor is the next complaint. Whenever you introduce a child, it's going to make it more kid-friendly. It's going to cement that this is not the grown-up, mature version of the film. And I do agree with it. But as I said, when I watched this at 10 years old or 9 years old, I loved that there was a kid. And again, he's not the problem with this film. He's really good in it. Like, the kid can sing, he can dance, he's got a couple of great lines. I feel like once he puts on the Blues Brothers outfit, he does lose a bit of his personality. When we first meet him, he's kind of answering back to Elwood, and I really like that, and I wish they had have lent into that more. It would have been great if they had have made it R-rated and have him cursing. Like, that would have been really funny, I think. But again, I don't think he's the problem with the film either. The problem with the film is it's a carbon copy of the first one with, a PG filter. Anyway, lack of a clear mission. I can see this one as well. The first one's very simple. We're on a mission from God. They're saving the orphanage. That's the plan. And then other things happen. With this one, Elwood doesn't really have a plan other than he doesn't know what to do, so he gets the band back together, and they're going to go to this battle of the bands. But it's a very slow, meandering plot. There's no real direction. There's no real agenda. They only play 2 gigs. They play at a county fair. They play Ghost Riders in the Sky or Riders in the Sky. Really cool rendition of that. And then they play at the Battle of the Bands, or they audition at the Battle of the Bands and then play, but it's the same venue. So they only play together as a group 2 or 3 times. It feels like in the first movie they played together a lot more. Maybe they didn't. Maybe I'm forgetting. But I feel like they played together a lot more. Anyway, that's fine. Cartoonish tone was another complaint. I don't mind there being cartoonish tone. The first one definitely had that as well. Like, you got them leaping cars over bridges, being chased by Nazis to the tune of Ride of the Valkyries. Like, there's definitely a cartoonish tone to the first one. This one leans into more, as I said, the Blues Brothers getting turned into zombies, definitely very cartoony. Skeleton horses riding through the sky as they play, very cartoony. I don't have an issue with it, though. I think once the magic comes into it, when Queen Musette is using her magic, she's making them dance. She makes instruments appear. She's flying around. That is probably a little bit silly, because for all the cartoonish parts of the first one, you could see that a version of that happening in real life. Not that I'm looking for reality in a Blues Brothers movie, but you could see a lot of that happening. Whereas this all happens at one point. Cab gets kind of possessed by the spirit of Christ. Not possessed like a zombie or a demon, but it's like filled with the power of Christ and flies up. But then that happens to Jake in the first movie as well, so I'm not even against that. And then pointless plot, I would kind of tie back into lack of a clear mission, and I do agree. It's definitely less focused than the first one. Despite all of these, and I agree with a lot of them, I don't think they're the recipe for a bad film. It feels more like the movie itself doesn't have a purpose. The fact that Elwood doesn't have a purpose, I don't really mind. That would actually be interesting if you found himself completely without purpose. Just like the movie is made for the sake of making a sequel. There's no real agenda there, which was a bit of a shame. But again, I still like it. All right. We've talked about the history of the film. We've talked about all the details. We've talked about why people don't like it. And I've even agreed with some of those reasons. So now let's dive into why you should watch it. And I'll be honest, unlike the previous iterations of this show, there are far less reasons. And that's because I do agree. Objectively, it's a bad movie. But I really like it. And it's going to be a huge part of it is nostalgia and sentimental value. I remember when I watched it for the first time, was on a hotel TV. We bought a movie in a hotel, which we'd never done before as a family. It was the 5 of us. It was before my parents divorced. I can't remember where we were, but we were staying in a hotel and we saw it was on the TV, and we asked my parents, like, can we watch it? Can we buy it? And we all sat down in this hotel room eating God knows what. I can't remember what we had. And now we're just sitting there and we watched it, and it was the best time. Just the 5 of us sitting down watching this new Blues Brothers film. And you're 8 years old, you don't know if films are bad. Everything's great. And I really enjoyed it. And I still enjoy big parts of it. But it's not one I recommend to a lot of people. Because I get it. But why should you watch it? Let's start with the strongest part of the film, which is the soundtrack. The soundtrack is awesome. Both films have fantastic soundtracks. That Briefcase Full of Blues album is fantastic because they're using great music as their inspiration. So many great tracks. The Blues Don't Bother Me, Born in Chicago, Maybe I'm Wrong, Down in New Orleans, Turn on Your Love Light, Let There Be Drums. There's just so many great. How Blue Can You Get, Cheaper to Keep Her, Looking for a Fox. They're all brilliant tracks, really, really good songs. Not as tight as the first soundtrack, but still great. Stunts. The stunts are still there. There's some great car chase work. Even though it is neutered a little bit by the PG rating, there's still some really great stunts in there. And if you want to show someone a bit younger a film with great car stunts, this isn't a bad one to do. I can't show my daughter The Blues Brothers. Probably can't show this one either. It's probably still a bit too grown up for her because they do push some jokes, I was surprised to hear in a PG film. But there's some good stunt work in there that younger audiences could definitely watch. All the cameos. There's so many wonderful cameos, and cameos they couldn't get for the first film. They really loaded up. Like, at the end of the film, spoiler alert for a 20-year-old movie, at the Battle of the Bands, the Blues Brothers lose to the Louisiana Gator Boys. And as a kid, I was like, how? How did they lose? Now as an adult, and I see that their band is made up of B.B. King and Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton and like all these incredible, like Isaac Hayes. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's so many amazing musicians. Like, of course they lost to them. Because it's like the best supergroup ever. John Goodman is a reason to watch this film. He's so joyful and joyous and fun and sweet, and I wish they'd lent into that relationship more, because there's so much focus on repeating jokes and bits from the previous film. There's not a lot of character development. In the first one, there's not a lot, but they're brothers, and there's a lot of dialogue between them. Elwood and Mac don't really talk that much in the movie. And I feel like if, maybe they had have used him as emotional support to Elwood and been like, tell me about your brother and stuff like that, I think there could have possibly been more to that character. But I do like him. And, John Goodman's always a win. And then the final reason I think you should watch it is in the final moments of the movie. And it's the first time I really put it all together. It's been a while since I've watched this one. And as a kid, I didn't really get it. But as an adult and as a father, now I get it. And my final reason you should watch it, it's just a very quick moment, but I really like it, is that Elwood has found his new purpose. At the beginning of the movie, he's lost. He doesn't have his brother. He's all alone. And he doesn't know what to do, so he puts the band back together. In the final moments of the film, he and Buster are in the Bluesmobile. They're racing away from the cops. The police are behind them. There's headlights kind of blinking, like flaring, and you can hear the sirens. And as they're driving off into the sunset or into the dark, Buster turns to Elwood and goes, you know what, Elwood, you're right. The Lord does work in mysterious ways. And Elwood goes, yep. And he looks over at the kid and just gives like the hint of a smile. And you're like, he's found his purpose now. He's found his new family. And yes, he kidnapped this child from the nuns, and that's not good. But like, he found this loner kid who also wasn't happy where he was. And through music, they've bonded. And now he's going to look after this kid. And he might not be the best role model for him, but this kid has kind of brought a little bit of joy back to him. And he has now kind of fully assumed the role of mentor. And whether or not that's developed well in the film or not, that little moment at the end of the film is a really sweet moment, and gives you hope for these kind of weirdo musicians. So that's it. Blues Brothers 2000 is a highly divisive film, mostly critiqued. I haven't spoken to anyone outside of my family who I know that enjoys it, and I'd be interested to know if my brother and sister still like the film today. But I definitely had a lot of fun with it. Not as much as with the first one, but I definitely enjoyed it a lot. So that's that. I'm not sure what we're going to do next. I think American Werewolf in Paris might be next. I've got a whole list of these, so we're going to keep going. There's so many movies that I can tell you to watch and why you should watch them. But until we get to that, that is why you should watch Blues Brothers 2000. I'll see you next week.